Hi there, welcome to this video where I'm going to show you how everyday objects can make great photos. Now at the moment I've got the virus, so I'm stuck at home and I can't travel, so you'll have to bear with me as I struggle through this video. Nothing to be concerned about, I've just got mild cold-like symptoms, but because I can't travel, I've got to be inventive about what I take photographs of. Now many people struggle to come up with ideas and they're in the similar position to me that they can't travel anywhere, so what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how you can find interesting things around your house to take photographs of, and just another way to enjoy your photography. Now I bet there's been loads of times when you've been stuck for inspiration and just thought, if only I could go to Italy or Iceland or maybe the Lake District or somewhere that would really improve my photography. But that's not always the case, as with me at the moment where I can't travel, or maybe you're stuck in due to some kind of illness. There's lots of reasons why people can't travel, but that doesn't mean that you can't still take great photographs. Many photographers seem to forget that you don't have to take an award-winning picture every time you press a shutter. Photography can just be done for the enjoyment of it, so spend some time looking for patterns or textures. Recently I've done several challenges where I've looked for letters of the alphabet in nature and also numbers around my local environment. It's been an interesting way of challenging myself and practicing to become more observant. But then when you are in that great location that you've dreamed of being in for a long while, you can use some of those creative skills that you've developed to create better photographs that you might not have considered without all the experimentation you've done with the everyday objects. Perspective is one really important thing to consider. Quite often we view the world either standing up or sitting down, but there are lots of other viewpoints that you can utilize when taking a photograph. Either point the camera up or point the camera down, lie on the floor, kneel down, climb a step ladder, anything to give you a different perspective. Think about a cat or dog's eye view of the world. They see things from much lower down, so get down to their level and you'll see things in a much more interesting way, things you might not have seen before or ways to consider them. And this is especially true if you're taking photographs of animals themselves. It's much better to get down to their eye level than to take a shot looking down on them. Take your everyday object and play with it. Stretch yourself to try and think of something different. So maybe experiment with lighting, angles, something that you may not have considered before, and that will really set your photos apart. Look around your house and try and find an object that you can present in an unusual way, maybe for its reflective quality or a geometric pattern or a texture. What's most important though, remember to not be bogged down by that perceived notion of what a judge might say or what somebody else might say. If you find the photograph interesting, then crack on. Now the first object that I found around the house was this guard that comes off the front of an electric fan, and I thought it was quite interesting because of the pattern that it created on the front of it. So what I thought I'd do is I'd use this to practice some depth of field and see how the depth of field affected the way that the photographs turned out. Now to start with, I photographed this with the aperture set at f/25, so this gave me a very wide depth of field, meaning that most things front to back were in reasonable focus. But actually I didn't like this as a photograph. It didn't seem quite right. It seemed a little bit too ordinary. So what I did is I turned the aperture to its widest or almost widest, about f/3.2, and this gave me a really shallow depth of field, and I really like this image because it's more abstract. It can't quite tell what it is, and so this was a really good practice in using depth of field and seeing the results that I got from it. Light itself can be a subject because it can create shadows, it can create interesting patterns as it reflects off things. Now this can be from artificial light or natural light. The more that you experiment, the more you give yourself permission to think outside the box, and that way your photography will improve no end. While I was trying to get another shot, I picked up a spaghetti jar just to use it as a bit of a plinth to put a bottle on the top of. But I took the lid off the spaghetti jar and I saw this really interesting pattern here that the spaghetti was making inside the jar, and it turned out to be more interesting than the bottle that I put on the top. While I'd got my macro lens on the camera, what I decided to do was take a photograph of one of my mint £1 notes. Now the £1 note was withdrawn in 1988, so I'm quite proud of that. I've got a mint condition one in my collection, and the photograph really shows off the detail of the design. So if you're interested in doing that, I'll put a link down below where you can go and check out the rules about taking photographs of banknotes. I've done an experiment with depth of field, so next I wanted to have a little bit of an experiment with shutter speed. So I thought what I'd do for this is use some running water so I could freeze the action or let the action blur. This is my setup for my running water shot. I've got the glass underneath the running tap, and then it's sat on a mug down in the bottom of the sink. Now behind, I've put a jigsaw case that's completely black, so that makes for a really good background. Then just off to the side here, I've got a light, and that's really important to manage to get the shutter speed up quick enough to freeze the water. And then the camera is set up at a really odd jaunty angle just here, ready to take the shot. And this first shot, I had a slow shutter speed purposely to make the water go very misty. I really like this shot because I think it's quite atmospheric and very ethereal. Now, all I've done to this shot is I've just painted out the stream of water that was coming down and hitting the top of the wine glass, because I think it just gives an extra air of mystery. So then what I decided to do is freeze the water. Now, to achieve this, what I had to do is lift the shutter speed. It had to become a lot faster, and to make sure that this happened, I had to lift the ISO, and I also had to throw some extra light into the scene from an additional light. Now unfortunately, I had to keep the aperture quite wide open as well, so I've got quite a shallow depth of field. Now in hindsight, I should have used flash for this, because it would have allowed me to get a larger depth of field. Now there is the downside that I might have ended up lighting the background as well. I then went into the fridge and I found a strawberry, and I thought I'd make this image very, very simple. So I got a white plate and I placed the strawberry on the white plate. Now there was a window behind it, and I put a light in front of it just to balance out the shadows. Now the first image was taken with my 20mm wide angle lens, and I took a shot of the whole strawberry, and I do like the way it appears to just be floating in a sea of white. I do like that. And then with the second image, I went and put my macro lens back on and focused really closely on the seeds to pick out the details. And these are the kind of things that you can see with a macro lens. Now with both of these shots, I did slightly overexpose on purpose to give the background a high key effect. Next, I had a look around the kitchen for some interesting utensils, and I came across this cheese grater. Now, as I took it over to the table where I was going to photograph it, as I got into the sunlight that was coming through the window, a really interesting shadow was created on the top of the table as the sunlight came through these holes and hit the table. So I thought I must take a shot of that. Then what I really wanted to do was take a shot right down inside the cheese grater. Now at the time I'd got my 105mm macro lens on. Now this will take any shot, it doesn't have to be macro, but I found that if I tried to take a shot inside the cheese grater with this lens on, I would need to be about this far away from the end of the cheese grater to get the whole of the thing in the frame, and this just didn't work because it compressed the detail inside the cheese grater and it wasn't what I was really looking for. So I changed my lens from the 105 to a 20mm prime lens, and what this allowed me to do is get the lens right inside the end of the cheese grater, and because of the wide angle I got a really interesting perspective. So what I then tried to do is make sure I got some light inside the cheese grater, and I set it up so that it was pointing towards the sun, so the large holes here on the top were pointing towards the sun, and I'd got it set on the table and the lens was just here stopping it from falling over, and I got this shot. So the beauty of this photography is it's not dependent on the weather or even the light. There's lots of inspiration all around your house once you start training yourself to see it and think of things in a different way. Now I hope you found this video enjoyable and I've given you some food for thought about how to improve your creativity. Now I've only scratched the surface in this video about what I could photograph or some of the techniques that I could use. Really, at the end of the day, it all comes down to how creative you are and how your brain works. But if you are stuck for ideas, you can always go over to the internet, look on YouTube or Pinterest or something along those lines, and you'll get lots of different ideas that you could try out yourself. And hopefully what it will do is when you get into that special location, you'll know how to be a little bit more creative. If you've stayed with me to the end of the video and managed to put up with my slightly croaky voice, thanks ever so much, it's really appreciated. If you've got any comments or questions, let me know down below or nip over to my Instagram account and leave me your comments there. Also, if you like what I do on the channel, you can support me greatly by visiting my Teespring store. There I've got a range of merchandise on offer, so go and check that out. But you don't have to spend any money at all to support the channel. You can do that simply by clicking like, subscribe and the bell notifications, because that really helps the channel out and it makes sure that you don't miss out on any of my future content. Watch out for next week's video, that goes live on Sunday. In the meantime, you can always check out this video up here, but all that's left now is to say, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.